Welcome to GCCars, my name is Eric and this is the all-new 2023 Genesis GV60. This GV60 is actually based on the Kia EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5. We've already tested both of them, of course, and we really like them. Naturally though, for the Genesis version, there's a lot more luxury and better features, and I guess this is the top spec performance overdrive version, more power. We have 483 horsepower and over 500 pound-feet of torque when we use that sweet boost button. We'll get to what that exactly is later on. But this is pretty fast, and at over $90,000 Canadian, it actually compares exactly and pretty well with the Mach-E GT we've already tested earlier this year. So I'm very interested to see which one of the two I will prefer. Let's start off by taking a look at the exterior, and yeah, it looks pretty interesting, let's say it like that. It certainly is polarizing, and I give Genesis kudos for trying something new. Personally, I'm just not the biggest fan of it. I like certain details. I think the headlights in isolation look really nice. I think the wheels are actually really nice, and some of the best EV wheels we have seen, you know, on the car, on any EV I mean. But overall, I think it's a little too outlandish for me. But styling is always very subjective, so you kind of have to decide for yourself, right? Just a few quirks we have, of course, our electronically opening and closing port. And one very interesting feature that this GV60 here gets is this tiny little panel on the B pillar. Can you guess what it is? It's basically Face ID. Of course not the Apple product, but it is a face scanner. So you can just walk up to your car, it scans you, unlocks, you can get in and you can drive off, which is really cool. But like I always say, styling is very subjective, so just let me know. Do you think this looks good? Or do you think it does not look good? Let's just phrase it like that, okay? In the meantime, we're just gonna take a look at the interior, because for a luxury product, that's where the money is, right? Okay, let's take a look at the interior here of the GV60, and as you expect from a Genesis, it's really nice. Like all the materials, all the touch points, super soft, nice leathers. We have a bit of suede-like leather here, we have metals, so it's nice and varied, and it's just visually very pleasing. And they've done some interesting things, some quirky ideas just like that on the exterior, but I find them to be a little more tasteful on the interior. For example, you see that? That's our mirror control. Admittedly, not the nicest plastic I've ever felt, but neither had the EQS. But that's our mirror control. I've never seen it in that spot, and I think it's just actually really nice to use. The Bowers & Wilkinson here is decent, but not amazing. It's alright, but nothing that blows you away. Getting back to like your position and your experience though, and let's talk about seats. These seats are very comfortable. A lot of lateral support if you want it, heated, ventilated, even massage function. Not quite Lincoln or Mercedes massage, but still nice to have. And you can actually get quite low in the seating position. You can get quite sporty here, which I didn't expect, because normally in SUVs, you know, you sit a little more upright, you sit a little bit more forward, but this is really good. Steering wheel is nice, two-spoke. It's a little quirky, but we have the boost button. Like I said, we're gonna get to that. We have a drive mode button, and then we have, what's really nice, a touchpad, like a tiny little touch button here on the right-hand side, and I love that. We've seen that in Mercedes for years, and it allows you to control like the source or some of the gauge cluster stuff. It's really good. Only issue is there's a reason why Mercedes doesn't put it right on the outside of the steering wheel, because if you're driving, you know, occasionally sometimes your hand goes a little lower, and then you just switch your radio channels, and I've done that plenty of times. So can we move it to the inside? Otherwise, I love that. And while we're speaking of radio, well, the infotainment is a typical Genesis system. It is feature rich, it is extremely responsive, one of the best infotainments on the market. The gauge cluster is digital, not super customizable, but has everything you need. It looks good. We have a head-up display that works well, and then we have all of our 8-track controls actually in a separate button, well, screen and button array down below. So you don't have to go through the infotainment, and only very few features are actually locked into the screen. Everything else, like temperature, heated seats, heated steering wheel, is all physical. Now lastly, there's one thing we got to talk about, and I haven't talked about it yet, but it's the coolest thing. The orb. The orb. So we're going to turn this car off. You see, we have this orb right here, and it lights up and it's illuminated and it kind of reflects really cool, and I think it's mirrored at the bottom. It looks fantastic, amazing. And then once you turn the car on, it flips around to reveal your gear shifter, which is also ergonomically just very satisfying to use. Now, am I a little concerned about what happens when that breaks? Yes, but at the moment it's just really cool and I absolutely love it. It's such a cool feature. It just looks amazing. Putting our attention more to the back. Of course, we have a sunroof up top, but then backseat passengers will be very comfortable. You have heated seats on both sides, plenty of space, good material, sunshades included in the doors. And if you're the right-hand side passenger and you want to have a bit more space, well, preferably also if nobody sits here, you can just put your arm and your hand right here on the left-hand side, and you can actually move the passenger seat from your position, which is really cool. So you can get a bit more space for your legs if nobody else is there. Now, will that be used often? I doubt it, because I don't think the GV60 is quite the car in which people get chauffeured in. But hey, I'm going to say no to extra features. Of course not. This is cool. And lastly, trunk. Well, this is a sportback SUV, so naturally getting bigger, bulkier items in there will be a little difficult just because the roofline slopes down. But as we have it right here, we have 24 cubic feet of space. No grocery bag hanging still. So space is a little less than the Mach-E, but the Mach-E is also bigger. But no, this is fantastic. This is great. I love this interior. But let's finally get to use this boost button, shall we? Let's go driving. Okay, now out on the road in the GV60 Sport mode, and for maximum performance, let's click boost, brake torque, and let's go. Oh! Ooh, and yeah, she goes. Oh, wow. Of course, the weather has turned a little, as you can see, and it is quite cold, so wet and cold, not necessarily the best combination for maximum, launch performance, but according to Car and Driver, this can accelerate 0 to 60, so 98 kilometers an hour in roughly 3.7 seconds. And as I said, we have this boost button, right? That gives us full power, 483 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque from two motors, one in the front, one in the back, from a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery. That's where the juice comes from. And well, you can drive it normally, or you can you can do the electric car stuff. So boost mode enabled. This is so stupid. I'll never get used to that. I will never get used to that. So the boost mode gives you 10 seconds of like maximum power. And even without it, it is just ridiculously fast, instant power. I love it. But of course, this is a luxury car. This is a luxury EV, so we do care a little bit more about how it is to actually drive on a daily driving basis. So in comfort mode, the response of the throttle is a little bit muted, a little bit more gradual, so you don't accidentally like keep, pushing them back in the seats and forward when you get off the throttle. And it's actually quite nice to drive. Of course, you have as much power as you need, so passing is no problem, accelerating is no problem. But this being an electric drivetrain, it is just butter smooth. No shifts to disrupt, no torque curve. It is just instant torque whenever you need it, and it's so easy to modulate how much throttle you get and how much power you get. It's a joy to drive. Like, there is just nothing better than electric drivetrains for luxury cars. For the most part, this doesn't drive too differently than an EV6 or a Hyundai Ioniq 5, apart of course from having a lot more power than those do. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they are really nice to drive, and this, like all the good things, really carry over into this GV60. It is a very smooth and easy to drive car. You have all the power you need, like I said, and even more in this one, and it is just pretty refined. It is what you expect from a luxury car. Suspension wise, it is very well damped, except for those smaller, harsher impacts, but I suspect that's probably from the weight, and it's just harder to control the motions of an EV because all the extra battery weight. But other than that, bigger bumps get absorbed really, really well. In terms of noise, vibration, and harshness, well, we have a vibration here in our steering wheel, which is a bit odd, and as soon as I put a little bit of force onto the horn, the vibration vanishes. I think that's just a bit of a defect, and that's probably can be fixed very easily and very quickly at the next service. So just mention that, but just something to note, right? That's something that I notice in here. But other than that, it is very quiet. It's a very quiet and isolated cabin, because we also have active noise canceling, meaning our speaker system inverts sound waves coming from the outside and basically cancels them out. So we have a quieter and more relaxed cabin experience, and that works really, really well. It's actually very nice and quiet. You can listen to the audio system really well and can enjoy that. And overall, like I said, EV powertrains are just perfect for luxury cars. Combine that with, for the most part, a really good suspension and a quiet cabin, and you just have an effortless driving experience, which is exactly what you want from EVs. Now, of course, let's talk a bit of a range, because that's an EV thing. We do get right around now a bit above freezing for the whole week. We get about 370 kilometers of range, so that's naturally less than you would get in warmer climates or in the summer, even here in Canada. But 370 kilometers isn't too bad. It's definitely a lot more than the Mach-E GT got us. That one got around 300 for me in admittedly a little worse conditions. But 370 starts to be something that's doable, and for the most part, you don't really have to worry about it, I would say. It's of course not the 700 we got in the summer out of the EQS, but that EQS was also double the price. So I don't think we can really fairly compare this to that. And consumption, just in case you care, is about 22.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers is what I average right now. So this is definitely in line, I think, with what you would expect, and you get a usable range. Of course, you can play around with your recuperation, so your braking, your regenerative braking. So right now I have it in coast mode essentially, so now there's no regenerative braking at all. You can put it into 1, 2, 3, or one pedal driving. They call it I-paddle. It's one pedal driving, so if I don't do anything, we come to a stop, and now I get on throttle, we go driving again, and if I let off, it'll break us down. It'll slow us down. I don't like that. It is not very efficient. Coasting is the most efficient. A lot of people like to use it, but I'm not a big fan of it, because it also makes the throttle paddle essentially two pedals, so the whole travel has to be utilized, and it makes it kind of spongy. You use whatever you use. Is it effortless because you don't have to use the brake really unless you're in an emergency? Yes. I just personally don't really like it. Charging, very quick. Like up to 350 kilowatt hour charge. Kilowatt hour charge. That's the correct term. Yeah. You know what I mean. Fast charging. Really, really fast charging. So this has no problem, no struggle to charge up if you have a station that supports it. I was at a 350 kilowatt hour charger twice with this. The maximum I managed was 200 kilowatt hours. You're just very bound to like what the station delivers at that time, but this in theory can charge I think 10 to 80 in like 18 minutes, which is pretty quick and pretty good. But no, this is a great experience. This is an amazing to drive car. It takes the base of the Ioniq 5 and the EV6 and just refines it more, makes it a little more fast, a little more punchy, a little more fun, and adds the luxury aspects to it that you expect from a Genesis. This is really good. But with that, I would say we send it off to the final thoughts. Okay, final thoughts on the 2023 Genesis GV60 Performance all-wheel drive. And just like I expected, it is a fantastic SUV. It is extremely nice on the inside. It has decent range, it has good power, it drives very well, and there's just some very, very minor nitpicks to have here at all. But comparing it to the Mach-E, well, that's the big question, right? Because I said both of them are really good, and it really comes down to what you're looking for in terms of which one you should pick. If you see cars more as an appliance and you care more about the A to B commuting, well, the GV60 will offer you a bit more range, bit nicer on the inside, although not that much. The Ford Mustang Mach-E is actually really, really good, and it is just a bit more usable, while the Mach-E offers you a bit more excitement, a little bit more handling, and a bit more driving dynamics that are just a bit better than what the GV60 can offer. So if you're looking for a bit of a sporty experience, the Mach-E is still the way to go. But looking at price, what does this cost? Well, that's actually a pretty good question, because I wasn't supplied with the price by Genesis, and you can't build and price them yet on the Canadian side. So I kind of had to just figure it out on my own. So if you go to Auto Trader Canada right now, you can find them between 90 to 110 grand. But if you take the Car and Driver press card, which was exactly like that, and just convert the US dollar price to Canadian, we come out at roughly $92,750 Canadian. Undoubtedly, still quite a lot of money, especially for an SUV this size. But if you want to have an EV, unfortunately, there's still the tax basically of buying in. But speaking of tax, you get a tax credit, right? So there's a reduction on that, and I think right now in Ontario it's $5,000. So depending on where you are when you watch this video, it will be a little cheaper. But nonetheless, this is a fantastic SUV and I can highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.